What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff, and we're going to talk today about how college alumni can show support and how it affects musicians that want to get into the music industry through school. So, if you're interested in topics like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you want to encourage others to see more videos like this, and make sure you subscribe in order to catch my latest video. So, today we're going to actually explore a lot of numbers, and we're going to learn a little bit of the purpose, and we're going to figure out how things work. So let's go ahead and get this out the way. But essentially, I'll give like kind of my understanding of how alumni support works. So basically, you would graduate, and there's either some kind of organization, a funnel, or committee dedicated to understanding what you guys are donating as alumni. And then, of course, they're tasked with how to use that funding for future students, current students, or to maybe give you perks of being a part of the alumni there. So, what happens with that typically, in my opinion, is that a lot of people will use that as a benefits package, meaning they're going to try to find ways to choose why to donate, whether or not, or they're going to choose why they want to donate over whether or not they feel like they should donate. So they could get a degree, but doesn't necessarily mean that they want to donate for the sake of getting that degree from your school. So a lot of the issues I see that people run into is that they'll go to school and they'll maybe have a great experience or even have a bad one, but they'll try to tee it up to either school's not for me or they don't really choose the correct degree, or in other ways, a lot of people will try to complain about the job market that they're trying to get into. But if you were to take a step back and really think about what your school is set up to do for you, then you would kind of look at when you're in school and you're trying to actually achieve whatever goal your school is helping you achieve. You got to really ask yourself, how are they making that happen, right? And so there's always the stigma and the joke about college being like a party place or like a Chuck E. Cheese for adults or the 13th grade. And that is true in some cases. But if that is true, then we have to look at why that is and how that's helping students get to where they are, right? So, for example, my school, they had more of, I think it was more of a like nursing program that they were known for. So it wouldn't really make sense to go there if you were trying to get a degree in agriculture, just out of all the options available, right? So naturally, if you got a degree from this school, we could assume you wouldn't feel inclined to donate to this school or show alumni support unless you had like an amazing experience. So now, when we understand that, we got to really think about the greater scheme of why people go to college, right? So when we think about homecoming, when we think about pep band or pep rallies rather, and all these different things that come with college, joining the different organizations, the networks, the fraternities and sororities, why are people attending college, and then what would give them the inclination to want to donate to the people that's coming behind them? So that's kind of what we're going to explore and try to figure out how it works and whether or not it's truly effective the way it's set up. And if you want to participate in it, what you're really up against or really dealing with when it comes to going to college, or if you've gone to college, how you can show support for students ahead of you. Now, the grand scheme of this whole thing is going to be important for musicians because you're going to kind of be able to understand what's going on with your career in the early stages and understand how the inner workings of the economy you deal with, whether it's just you and your education or whether it's the overarching music industry. You can see in general how it works when you can look at college support, financial aid, and all these different things. So we're going to take a quick look at your boy here. Where is it? Let's set it up. Gemini. Gemini is going to help us navigate a lot of this. So I did ask it a few questions already just to kind of get it started. But we're going to start at the very, very, very beginning. And it is, what is the point of alumni donation? So I'm just going to read it and then we're going to just kind of give our opinion as we go. So it says the purpose of alumni donations is multifaceted, serving both the university's financial and reputational health, as well as the personal satisfaction and loyalty of the graduates themselves. So I would say that's a little bit in line with what I was saying in the beginning. A lot of it is gonna just help the place have nice bathrooms and clean floors and things like that. But I would say personally, I would say a big part of it is the personal satisfaction, the loyalty of the graduates themselves, and things like that. And so it continues to say that the reasons for alumni giving can be categorized into direct financial impact and strategic institutional value. So it says number one, direct financial impact, which is fueling the university. Alumni gifts provide a crucial, diversified revenue stream for universities, funding from everything from immediate needs to long term growth. And then it has here a little chart with categories saying student financial aid, current operations, capital and endowment, programs and services. So you can see the different typical uses of the funds, but we'll go through some of the examples just for the sake of time. So for student financial aid, this helps make education more accessible and increases student retention and graduation rates. Wow, that was hard for some reason. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, if you're on your like senior year and you need to pay for like 2 semesters, having student financial aid for your university is going to help get that student across the finish line. And then it says current operations, which would include funding essential but less glamorous items like technology upgrades, so like computers, mouses, and security cameras, library resources, or the day to day running costs of the university. Now, one thing I realized too, at my college, they had a bus stop at the front. They had a few bus stops on their campus. And when you think about it, you have to actually get that cleared by the city and probably pay something for that to be on your campus. So if you want your campus to have some good transportation, that's going to come through, or at least some of this is going to come through alumni gifting. Capital and endowment. So the next thing it says is financing new buildings like labs, dorms, athletic facilities, endowing faculty chairs to attract top professors, and funding long term research projects. That actually sounds like one of the best parts of this, really. Because in the school I went to, we had a big overhaul on like a lot of different buildings, features, and things like that. And I'm sure it did attract pretty much the best of the best that are out there. And then the last it says programs and services, funding career services, research grants, and studying abroad programs, and alumni led student mentorship initiatives. That's actually a pretty good one as well. So, all of these things are ways that just directly funding the university can be affected by alumni donation. So, for the sake of musicians, if you go to your college now and it's like you guys have terrible tubas, all your tubas are dirty, your trumpets are all bent, and your flutes are all out of tune, there's ways for your alumni to put their heads together to help you guys get what you need, if not outsource what you need to get better instruments or just better resources for future students. It's very, very, very simply put, right? And so number two, it says strategic institutional value. So this is the second way it affects colleges, and this is the participation rate. For many institutions, the sheer number of alumni who donate, which is the participation rate, is as important as the total amount raised. A high participation rate provides several strategic advantages. And then it has them listed here the same way. Reputation and rankings. So historically, alumni participation was a significant metric used by national publications like the US News and World Report. Although this metric is being phased out in some major rankings, a high rate is still viewed as a powerful indicator of alumni satisfaction. Major donors, corporations, and foundations often use the alumni participation rate as a litmus test. They are more likely to invest large sums in an institution that its own graduates actively support, seeing it as a sign of institutional strength and good management. And that means that they're attracting external funding. So you'll get things like, oh, I've heard of that college. You'll see a lot of people buying merch and things like that at the school store. Next, it says pipeline development. An alum who gives $10 a day is much more likely to become an engaged major donor in the future. The annual fund, made up of small gifts, serves as a crucial starting point to cultivate a long term relationship. So eventually, what they're saying is if you graduated by like 21, 22, and you immediately started giving $10 a day, by the time you're like 50, they're going to see how much you've given to the university, and you would probably be near, you probably outrank most donors across the board, especially if you're in one of the, I guess, more common average performing colleges and things like that. And then last, it says valuing the degree. A successful, well funded university enhances its reputation, which in turn increases the perceived value of every graduate's degree. In this sense, alumni donations are a form of investment in their own professional credentials. So I'm sure right now you can ring off about two or three colleges that you've never been to, never heard of, but you know their names. And that probably comes from the participation of their alumni, if not their reputation. So that's how it works. So now we're going to take a look at, let's scroll up here at the top. The question I had asked it in the beginning is, how are we able to see how much a college or university's alumni support their alma mater? And so Gemini put it all together and basically searched online and put a small little summary here. So it has links for all of the sources here, but for the sake of time, we're just going to read what Gemini pops up. And of course, tell me in the comments what's right or wrong. So Gemini says, yes, we are definitely able to see how much a college or university's alumni support their alma mater. And there are a few common ways this is measured. Number one, alumni giving rate, or the participation rate that we talked about. This is the most common metric used to measure alumni support and is defined as the percentage of an institution's alumni who make an annual financial contribution to the school. What it shows is that it's often viewed as a key indicator of alumni satisfaction and engagement. So it proves that y'all actually like the school you got a degree from. And then in the national context, the typical alumni giving rate for surveyed schools is around 8%. But the top schools can be significantly higher in the 30 to over 40% range. So if we stop right there, we can already try to probably formulate a few questions as to why there's almost a 28 to 38% difference. Yeah, in the giving rates here. So it says the typical alumni giving rate for surveyed schools is around 8%. But then suddenly when you get to the top schools, it jumps 28, 30%. That's pretty ridiculous. So examples of the high rate schools as far as 2022 and 2023 are Princeton University, Dartmouth University, College of the Holy Cross, and Carleton University. Now, those are at 46%, 36%, 35%, and 32%, with the typical alumni rate being 8. So we can kind of guess and come up with a few assumptions as to what the big difference is. But if I were to assume that it would be solely on the, I guess you can say, requirements we named earlier, either these schools have amazing professors, and when you get a degree, it just feels amazing when you come out of that school that you're just almost, I don't know, obligated to give some money back, or they have the, I guess you can say, network to kind of understand that the value in working together, cooperating, whether it's financially or politically, makes them a bit more powerful in terms of representation. Because this was just 2 years ago as far as the recording of this video, and a 46% participation rate compared to the average being 8 is pretty freaking ridiculous. Now, it's not only ridiculous, but it proves that it's intentional. Like, they have clearly a pipeline to help people or support people doing that. And so the second thing, it says now total dollars raised from alumni. This metric shows the raw financial support provided by the alumni community. The sheer scale of the financial commitment from alumni is what it shows, and the overall trend is that alumni giving to the U.S. colleges and universities is a major source of philanthropic support, contributing billions of dollars annually. I wouldn't have guessed billions. That's crazy. For example, in fiscal year 2018, alumni contributed 12.15 billion to the United States higher education institutions, representing about 26% of the total amount raised that year. So, the alumni raised 12.15 billion, and that represented 26%, and then we have the top 4 starting off at 32% participation rate. So that proves that those top colleges are holding most of the weight when it comes to this 12.5 billion. I'm gonna just put 12.5. So then what does that mean about the alumni that are supporting the 8% or lower? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean what I was saying earlier, that they do or don't like their school, but it does mean that their participation rate is way lower in this huge number we have here, which is 12.15 billion. So there is some argument where you can make that the schools with the higher level of participation rate are going to provide the alumni that can provide more money. So let's get to the next point so let's look at where to find the data. The most reliable sources for this information are the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, or CASE, and they conduct the Voluntary Support of Education Survey, which is a definitive source for overall philanthropic data, including the total amount of money alumni contribute to U.S. higher education. And then the next source is college or university websites. Institutions will often publicly share their alumni giving rates and total fundraising figures on their own giving or advancement pages, especially when running a campaign. And then lastly, we have news reports and rankings. Publications like the U.S. News and World Report have historically published lists of schools with the highest alumni giving rates, drawing on their own survey data. So you can use these sources to kind of figure out, how much money and who and why and where and things like that. You can figure all that out from these sources here. Now, I would say this though, if you want to have a specific career path, then I would take a look at this data as far as how you're going to function after you get your degree, because like we said, $12.15 billion being contributed in 2018 is pretty crazy, considering the fact that only a few schools are making most of the contributions to that large number. So next question I asked it was, could you find the top 10 schools and make a list? And so Gemini went ahead and said the best measure of alumni support is the alumni giving rate, right? Which is the percentage of undergraduate alumni who make a financial donation in a given year. So based on the most recently published data from sources like the U.S. News and World Report, survey of colleges and universities for 2022 and 2023 academic year are the top ranking schools for alumni giving rate are given right here. So we're starting off with Princeton, Dartmouth, the College of Holy Cross, and then we have the United States Military Academy in New York, the University of Notre Dame, Carleton University, Carleton College, Duke University, and Mount Holyoke College, and Colgate University. I probably slaughtered those last names. But even the top 10, if we get to the top 10, number 10 is starting at a 25% alumni giving rate. So that's just 10 schools out of the nation's number. So that's actually pretty crazy, considering the amount of money that comes in. And so some of the context is given here, and it says that the average alumni giving rate for all surveyed schools is typically around 8%. The schools on this top 10 list demonstrate a significantly higher level of alumni participation, often 3 to 6 times the national average. So just consider that when you're picking your next school. The shift. Historically, the alumni giving rate was a key factor in major college ranking systems, as it was considered an indicator of alumni satisfaction. However, some ranking bodies like US News and World Report have recently removed this metric from their official methodology. So we're not really going to have to, hmm, we're going to have to really think about like whether or not we consider the participation rate or the amount when we're considering which school to choose, because you can have a lot of people participating, but if all of you are broke, what does it really add up to? And I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case given what we've learned. It seems like the schools with the higher participation rate give the most. So let's see. That's at least where my brain goes. So it says total donations versus participation. So it's important to note that a high participation rate is different from the total dollars raised. Schools with smaller alumni bodies and loyal donors often rank high in participation lists, while much larger universities often lead in total dollars raised due to multi-million or billion-dollar gifts from few wealthy alumni. So it really depends on what you value when it comes to your, I guess you can say, higher education, but it seems like the higher schools with, or the schools with higher participation, yeah, schools with smaller alumni bodies and loyal donors often rank high on the participation list. So you'll have people who are just more consistent, but then you'll have a school with more opportunity for alumni to give, where you'll have a few people giving a lot more money. So I guess you can really figure out whether you value the more communal aspect of participation, where you have a lot of people supporting way more students and it's growing and growing, or whether or not you just want to support, your school because you like it. And so let's check out, is there an average amount alumni typically give? And we figured out that it's about 8%, right? But we want to get down to like the dollar amount. So Gemini says that the concept of an average alumni donation amount is tricky, as it is heavily skewed by a few extremely large gifts, like we saw millions or billions. So it could be something like, campus renovations, entire buildings, and things like that, technology. So it says a more representative answer involves looking at the distribution of gift sizes. So, number one, the majority of donations are small. The typical everyday gift from an alumni is usually a modest amount. A 2022 survey of alumni giving found that nearly a quarter of respondents had donated less than $100. Many development offices actually prioritize high participation rates, getting as many alumni as possible to donate any amount. Over the average gift size, as a large base of small donor demonstrates, or as a large base of donor demonstrations, strong community engagement. So basically, what they're saying is many development offices prioritize larger participation rates because over time you will just have a larger amount of money growing. And so the next point it makes, that newer and younger alumni often prefer to give smaller amounts through methods like crowdfunding. So of course you can do things like, throw a concert, a little car wash or something like that to help give back to your school. But like I was saying earlier, there are opportunities for you to just give massive amounts of money or gifts back to your alma mater. And so the second point it has here is that the few big gifts, like I just mentioned, skew the average. The actual average dollar amount of all alumni gifts is pulled dramatically upward by a very small number of multi-million and multi-billion dollar donations from extremely wealthy alumni. So in the fiscal year through June 2022, donations to U.S. higher education institutions hit $59.5 billion. We just saw 12.15 in 2018. So 59.5 billion higher education institutions saw that much come from their alumni. And then the next point, it says that a staggering statistic from that period is that 95% of the donations of $5,000 or more were made by just 5%. So once you get over 5%, pretty much nobody is doing $5,000 or more. This highlights the massive impact of a few large contributors. And then lastly, it says only 3% of all one time donations were made up of $10,000 or more. So only 3% of everybody who donated just once in that time were over $10,000. So now let's get through a summary of the typical alumni giving. So it's a small chart here. It's actually only 2 points. So it says that the annual fund from donors is usually $25 to $500, and it's usually the purpose to boost the alumni participation rate or rankings and to fund immediate needs like scholarships and operational costs. So maybe there's a building fund or something like that, right? And then major donors, which is $5,000, apparently up to billions, to fund specific capital projects like buildings, endowed chairs, or major research initiatives. So that's how you can pretty much find awesome ways to support your alumni, support your college, and things like that. Now, as we point all of that out, why is that important to musicians? So, for many musicians, they're going to consider the path of going to college, right? And when you do that, you're going to have a lot of options in front of you. And I want you to consider what happens when you do get what you're asking for from your college. How do you support them, and should you support them, and whether or not it matters, right? So we went through all of those reasons, went through all of those outcomes and options, and even what has happened with the people that do support colleges now. And so it's important for musicians, like I said, to consider this because there's a certain level of development and resources that musicians specifically need. But we can't get that if we're only at an 8% participation rate. So if this was interesting to you and you value conversations like this, and if you're a musician and you plan on attending college soon, let me know how that's going, where, and what instruments you're playing in the comments. And also, fact check some of the information here because we will be working with more and more AI as we get into this. So I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.